Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us online. And being here to learn a little bit more about a neuromarketing research project that was run, highlighting the power of premium labeling for the wine and spirits industry. And a special thanks to the TLMI group for allowing us to present this lunch and learn opportunity with you all, and especially to our partner UPM for all their great support and all the hard work that has gone into not just this study, but many over the years. So diving in, Kurtz, many of you that are out there know us as the shiny guys. So we're the hot, cold, and digital transfer foil suppliers that many of you work with on a daily basis. But some things that you may not know about us is that you actually engage with our products on different levels, probably 200 times a day, and you may not even know it. So we have over 5,000 active products in our portfolio. We were founded in the late 1800s. We're a 125-year-old organization with locations all around the world and a global reach from an employee perspective to make sure we're as close as we can be to our customers and where they're producing at. You do touch our products and engage with them on the inside of your automobile, on the outside of your automobile, your appliances, of course, in the print and pack industry and label industry that we'll be talking about today. But there's a high level of engagement that comes with Kurtz, and we feel that that's one of the things that really sets us and differentiates us in the industry as a global leader. And really at the core of our DNA, it is decoration and sustainability. And we hope that that's pulled through in every message and every message that we deliver. Laurencia, to you.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this webinar, and especially for TLMI for having us here. I'm really happy to be speaking with you about this fascinating topic of the neuromarketing research on labels. I'm representing UPM Adhesive Materials, one of the world's leading suppliers of self-adhesive materials, offering high-performance, innovative self-adhesive products, including label materials, graphic solutions, and specialty tapes. At UPM, sustainability is the heart of everything we do. We are actively implementing responsible practice throughout our entire value chain. And what's even more exciting is that we're developing solutions that truly support a circular economy, making a real impact. So what brings us here today are the neuromarketing studies that we performed along with Kurtz, starting by the research on white wine that we conducted in Germany, followed by the research on gin that we did in Italy, and our latest project was the research that we performed on tequila. And the results will be ready to launch in November. Now let's take a look at some concepts of the neuromarketing. During the consumer journey, we'll see different stages, and we will focus on two moments of truth. The first moment of truth, when the consumer is in front of the shelf, where the packaging needs to capture the attention of the consumer. And then the second moment of truth, where the emotion and the comprehension takes part, where the product is stimulating the imagination of the consumer and he's being exciting, and the label and the packaging is communicating the characteristics of the wine or the product with this. So this is what we call the second moment of truth, when the consumer interacts with the product, and then hopefully create a desire, and finally encouraging the choice. So it's very important to understand the behavior of the consumer during these stages. And it's very important also to understand the importance of the role of the label in the packaging. The label has a dual function on the shelf. First of all, the appealing function to attract the attention, and second of all, the persuasive function to encourage the selection. So this is why we call the label the silent salesperson, because we consider that the label sells the first bottle, but the producer or the brand sells the rest. And here are some interesting neuromarketing highlights, some interesting information about the neuromarketing. There was a study on the wine sector conducted on 2,000 people that found that 82% of those consumers chose their favorite wine primarily based on the label. So we're now focusing again on the importance of the label in the packaging. Another important fact is that we only have 15 seconds to attract the attention of the consumer and to persuade him for the purchase. So 15 seconds is the average time a consumer spends in front of the shelf before making a purchase decision. Another important fact is that 95% of our daily decisions are driven by emotions. So even though we like to think that we make our decisions more rationally, the truth is that human beings are more driven by emotions. Then about the senses. The two most important senses in the neuromarketing studies are the sight and the touch. The sight in the first place. And why? This is because 90% of the amount of stimuli that comes to the brain comes from the visual input. And in the second place, there's touch. And this is very important because it's closely linked to our emotions. Finally, all of our senses are connected and influencing each other. So changing what a person sees can radically alter what they hear. Changing what they hear may influence what they feel, and altering what they feel can modify what they taste. But what really is neuromarketing? Neuromarketing is a science, it's a research discipline that aims to objectively and scientifically analyze the driver behind the decision-making process and the consumer behavior. So, besides a survey, the neuromarketing scientists use these tools called brain tracker, eye tracker, and bio tracker to understand the emotions and to understand where the consumer focus their side, where they focus the attraction on the shelf. Oh, I'm sorry. So Alan, tell me, why did Kurtz decided to take part in these studies?
Well, for Kurtz, we always want to get closer to the market, closer to the consumer and what the consumer is looking for in the industry. We like to consider ourselves close to the trends that are happening out there. And we want to partner with companies like UPM and others that have been involved in these studies to produce good data or even great data that could then be used within our industry.
Excellent. Excellent. So now we're going to focus on the study that we performed on white wine. So how we perform this kind of studies? In the first place, the target or the objective of this study was to focus on the label and how the label affected the choice of the consumer. So in this case, we eliminated all the variables to make sure we're only evaluating the labels. So all the labels had identical information, the same name of the wine, that it's not a real brand, no harvest, no price, no grape variety, not even the origin of the wine, only one design with one non-real brand. And about the about the packaging, all of these labels were used on the same bottles and identical capsules. So the only thing that changed among all the samples were how we printed these labels. So this design that you can see on the right was printed using 5 different foils with 6 different materials from UPM Raffatec. So as a result, there were 30 samples that were evaluated with our consumers. First of all, we studied very carefully the market that we're analyzing. For example, in this case, it's the wine market. So we studied the wine market and determined that the best place to conduct this study was in German consumers, white wine consumers, 50% women from 25 to 55 years of age. And how these studies are conducted. First of all, we evaluate the first moment of truth. That is the consumer in front of the shelf, in front of these 30 different samples, and they are instructed to choose only one bottle of wine, and they only have 15 seconds to do it. Then it comes the second moment of truth, where these consumers gets to interact with the bottle. And in this case, they are using the brain tracker and the bio tracker and also the eye tracker. And finally, in this case, this study, we get to evaluate the third moment of truth, where the consumer got to taste the wine coming from different labels. So would you like to see the results? I'll leave you with Alan for it.
So to talk about the results in a little bit more detail, specifically the first moment of truth, if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see an eye tracking heat map that gives you an idea on where the concentration was focused from people looking at the labels that were on the shelf. And if you remember what Florencia had commented early on in the presentation was we only have about 15 seconds to interact with the consumer and for them to make a decision and to move into the second moment of truth, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But you can see that the areas where the consumers focus that are in red are the areas where they spent the most time looking at it. And this, in the results, revealed some pretty interesting findings here. In the first 5 seconds, the consumers were able to immediately connect with the dark substrate material. They recognized it first, it had shelf appeal to them. They were immediately drawn to the finishing that was on the outside of it. But over a period of the 15-second time frame, their focuses shifted from the black label to the white label. And many found the white label more appealing, specifically as it related to the white wine industry research that we were doing and the white wine that was on the inside of the bottle. So if you've ever heard the saying, sometimes you can taste the label, this is where we like to say that the consumer began tasting the product before they ever tasted it, just based on the influence from the label. From here, we move into the second moment of truth. And in the second moment of truth, this is what we all want to drive to when we design or produce something. We want to get the consumer to begin engaging with it. In the second moment of truth here, the consumer starts to engage with the label material. They immediately notice that it's thicker, that the papers have embossed structures in them, that there's a combination of glossy and matte finishes. The texture of the paper and the embossed finishing is starting to come through in that tactile type experience where they're engaging with it. So they're learning the story, the brand's becoming alive more in their hands. They get a smooth, glossy, or the pearlescent effect of the papers that they may not have seen when it was on the shelf, and those finishes really start to shine through. Along with that, in the second moment of truth, you start to get into the embellishments in the design in more of an intimate fashion. So as you can see again from the heat tracker map on the right-hand side of the bottle, there's a lot of focus on the brand name and specifically the owl's eye in this case that is in the brand name and how all of that alignment is done. There's a lot more focus on the embossing structures that are throughout the label and that interaction that's going on with the label. So again, this is where that real storytelling and where things start to come alive. This is where your messaging starts to connect at the consumer level, and you're getting them closer to that decision to purchase. Now, naturally, when someone walks up to the shelf and they see, and you've all been to the supermarkets and you see the plethora of options there are maybe in the white wine section to pick from. And how do you choose that label? How do you stand out? How do you connect and tell that story in 15 seconds? And then getting to the second moment of truth is really where that connection can be made. But the consumer is only going to look at 1 to 2 bottles like this before making a decision. So that's where you really want to identify some of those different contrasts between the paper and the finishing. You want to pay attention to the details as they relate to the brand. The design has to be spot on. There has to be that tactical experience and that touch and feel that really starts to come alive with the product in their hand. All of those characteristics are really a requirement for finishing that story and bringing it home to where the consumer then trusts the product in order to begin moving to purchase. And really think of it down to that tasting the label. They're starting to have that experience before they've even experienced the product on the inside.
Thank you, Alan. So, as Alan mentioned, the labels that were chosen by our consumers were the ones that combined icy white paper with a tactile embossed finish or a cotton-based texture combined with shiny gold or bronze foil embellishments. And it's not only about the choice of the consumer, but it's also about the perception. Consumers perceived both of these combinations as higher quality and as product more premium. And we also got to evaluate how these labels affected the tasting experience. And as you can see here, those labels that were chosen by the consumers, the labels with uncoated tactile white paper, materials with shiny gold or bronze embellishments, were perceived as more elegant and flavorful. So consumers described these products as fruity, floral, and well balanced, even though the content, even though the liquid and the wine was the same in all of the bottles. On the other hand, those tasting from the bottles with smooth, glossy labels and no tactile or visual contrast were perceived as less rich and less pleasant in taste. And as I mentioned before, the content, the wine, was the same in all of the bottles of packaging. So here we can see how these labels really influenced the tasting experience of the consumers.
Yeah, and as a marketer, Florencia, that's my favorite part of the study is really what that experience, how it drives down to the taste and the satisfaction and the brand and trust building that occurs. All that starts, at the supermarket, at the point of sale, where they're just looking and engaging with the label. It's really exciting. So, from a best performing embellishment standpoint, the characteristics that stood out the most for the audience that was looking at this, the test audience, was they wanted to keep it classy. The white wine industry, for them, they immediately gravitated toward the gold embellishments that were on the label. The gold embellishments were very representative of what they expected to taste inside the label, like Florencia mentioned, the fruity or the floral taste. That was the expectation. That gold embellishment really went best with it, so they wanted to keep it classy. The embossing features and structures gave it that high-end appeal to set their expectation on what was going to be inside of it and of a premium product with a premium label. The lighting impacts for the consumer to look at, the lighting impacts were dynamic. They continued to change. There was nothing static about it. It looked different in your hand than it did on the shelf, and as you moved it around. So that lighting experience created uniqueness when you combine that with the embellishments that were on the outside. And of course, going back to that color, the color gave it the perceived taste expectations and or set the expectation for the consumer about what they were about to consume. So I love when those kind of results all and the performance all come together. Florencia, to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. So let's take a look at the best performing label materials. All of these label materials had some characteristics in common. First of all, the matte finish. So consumers tend to choose more the products or the labels using matte finish over a glossy finish. especially as Alan mentioned before, when you combine the matte finish with the embellishment. Also, what's very important is using textured papers. It could be smooth embossed finishing like an icy white, or a tactile appearance like Sabrash Ice Premium, or perhaps a hammered surface like Jazz. Also, the consumers appreciated the thicker papers, especially because thicker papers brings higher opacities and elegance to the label. And what's also important is the shade and the color. So in this case, where we evaluated the white wine, consumers tend to be attracted by the black paper, but then tend to choose the optical white paper. And that's because they relate this white label with a fruity or floral wine, and a black or dark label with a more strong and red wine. So these are characteristics that very important to consider when you are developing a design for a product. So just to share some final insights about the neuromarketing studies that we performed, some considerations to take. In this case, each project was custom designed. So we had an objective for each one of them, and we studied the market, and we decided where we wanted to conduct this study according to which region represents the consumer the best. So for example, for the white wine, we conducted the study in Germany. Then we conducted the study of gin in Italy, and finally the tequila research in North America. Also, what's very important is where do you want to focus the study? So in the white wine and the tequila study, we focused the study on the label and how the label impacted the consumer's choice. So to avoid being having this affect other variables affecting the choice, we only focused on the labels, the materials, and the embellishments. On the rest of the variables were eliminated by standardizing them all. Also, for example, in tequila, we wanted to focus on premium label, and this is why we chose a premium tequila, and we assessed the perception of quality and premiumness. And now I will leave you with Alan for some more considerations.
Yeah, so to kind of wrap up some of the results, we wanted to be able to present on some considerations to keep in mind that were bridged over all the different studies we've done, some trends that were set out from those studies as well, and then some specific maybe considerations or insights for brands and designers to consider when designing your labels and your packaging. So kind of going to the first stance, which falls over everything, just general considerations. Be sure to consider the full package. You've got to look at the graphics. You've got to look at the bottle design, the color, the shape, closures, hang tags, the wine or spirit color that's on the inside of it. You need to consider that full package. If you remember the heat tracking map that we showed, those consumers will engage to whatever their eyes can find, and they'll start to make a connection and build that connection with the brand and the storytelling you're trying to deliver right from the onset. And all of those things have influence and impact in that. And to make sure that you're considering all of those factors when putting a product out there. Again, tasting the label, tasting the package before it even gets to be consumed. The embellishment techniques and colors, printing and technologies that are used, make sure that you're considering that and how you want to bring that story to life. What kind of embossing structures, micro textures are you going to use? Holographic or iridescent type effects. That combination that Florencia just mentioned a minute ago of the gloss, matte, or satin effects side by side, and how colors impact what the perception is of taste and what what kind of influence that's going to have on the packaging in the long run. So kind of across all studies, you need to be thinking about those things up front and how you want to engage directly with your core audience that you're targeting. And along with that, we do have a number of trends that were kind of confirmed throughout all three research programs. Um, these are, interesting trends, some of which we knew or maybe could interpret, but it's really nice to have the data for them. Others that are brand new, like embellishments. For an example, it's not an option of doing embellishments. It's just what embellishments do you use to stand out on the shelf, depending on your core audience that you're trying to attract. Is it a bottom shelf type product? Is it a mid shelf? Is it a premium product? And setting the stage over those different materials used to embrace that full story. The use of metallic papers, foils, embossing structures, they promote leadership in the competitive retail environments. They demand it, promote it, and they stand out on the shelf. They get that user to that second interaction or that second moment of truth and engaging with the product. So you want to definitely drive to that type situation or that type connection with the consumer. So those different materials tell the story. The premium labels, directly translate into higher priced expectations. When the consumers in the multiple studies have been asked how they perceive the product or what price level they might perceive the product at, based on the design and the label and or packaging that went into it. In those situations, premium labels demanded an expectation of a premium price. And that's great for label manufacturers and brands to be aware of as they move into this and know what that core audience, what their expectation is and where you're trying to target as far as a price positioning point. Prioritize your tactical finishes on the key touch points that you want the consumer to engage with. If you made the entire label tactical and it has a feel to it, then you're going to take away from maybe the brand name or the brand recognition or maybe a sustainability message with the craft substrate that you're trying to promote. So be intentional with your design. Make sure that you look at those key touch points and those key areas that you want to enhance that premiumness of the package or of the product you're developing to be able to drive them to the purchase. And along with this, some important considerations that we felt were set just a little bit off from some of the other ones directly for brands and or for designers was, again, defining that target audience and what you want them to notice first and what you want to retain. Where do you want to start your story? And being able to connect with the consumer. Use designs, materials, substrates that are a foundation for interaction. Let the consumer question, how is it made, or if there's something hidden, or if there's something special. Get them to that second moment of truth where they can pick up and engage with the product, where they have a much better chance of purchasing that product. At all times, consider lighting and viewing angle. This isn't just lighting and viewing angle that's on the shelf at the store. This is when they engage with the product. How does it interchange with light? Is it a static image or does it become more refractive and more reflective? Is this going to be the kind of product they take home and they put on the shelf in their collection? Or is this going to be the kind of product that they give to someone as a gift? And under all those conditions, you have to consider what the product looks like, how light impacts it, how it's viewed and received by the individual receiving it. So with that, you need to have a balance of aesthetics, the brand storytelling, and to build the trust with the consumer. So we know it, we make it sound real easy in some of the previous slides, but it is a delicate balance of how that all comes together to convey the message and the story of the brand and the trust, especially if you're trying to wrap sustainability or product feasibility or production feasibility into that. all of those things have value and merit, and you just want to consider those up front when you're looking at how best to design it and looking at, again, the full package. And Florencia, I think that
That would be all. So with that, just want to say thank you to everyone that joined the webinar. And of course, we're open for some questions.
thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Florencia and Alan. We did have a few questions already come in. So one of those, Alan, I think this one might be for you that came in. How have you seen the market for label decoration change over the last couple of years? And what are the main differences in trends between spirit label direct decoration versus wine labels?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad it's two parts to it. So we've definitely seen trends and changes over the years. I'd really say since COVID, we've seen a lot of changes, and it accelerated a lot of things as far as how we look at premiumization in the industry and sustainability in the industry and what that looks like. And then if you separate that out into wine and then into spirits, I think that, the wine industry has stayed a little bit more conservative and to its roots as it revolves around decoration and embellishments that are applied on products, and knowing their core audience and target market. They use a lot of uncoated substrates. They're using a lot of foil stamping with different embellishment effects on it. And there's a variety, of course, but there's not a huge variety from brand to brand, bottle to bottle. And I'd say you see that variety a little bit more on the spirit side, with shorter runs due to digital technology, with more trendy spirits that are out in the industry, whether it be tequila or it be gin or it be the bourbon or whiskey market, and kind of how people engage with those brands and how they interact with them, and small limited runs and special batches, and where they're using the embellishments on there. I think it gives a little bit more freedom for how that design and creation and storytelling of the brand goes. So I hope I answered your questions.
No, that's great. That's great. Really appreciate your insights there. We had another one come in, and Fronta, this one maybe more geared for you. What role has sustainability played in your neuromarketing research studies? What were the reflections from consumers around the topic?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. There's a design trend where sustainable materials are no longer expected to look rustic, but instead allows us to create products with a premium appearance while still being environmentally friendly. So in our latest research on tequila, we used two sustainable products. One of them was agavos, which has fibers coming from the agave and also recycled fiber, and hipster, which is 100% recycled fiber. Both of these materials have a premium look, and the results were very interesting. These were considered natural papers, and as natural papers, they highlighted the authenticity of the product. And especially the combination with embellishments gave them a more premium look and enhanced their appearance. So this approach reflects a growing shift in premium packaging design, where sustainability and sophistication go hand by hand. So this is a clear example of our sustainable materials can elevate a brand's identity without compromising its environmental value.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have had a few more questions come in. One in the chat, one in the Q&A. The one that we've received from Anne Sophie, she just said that this is a very interesting that a label can affect the perception, even the taste. I know you all touched on where the study was done, but maybe if you could just do a refresh. if the study was done in France or Italy, or how the results differed on that. I know you touched on it a bit, but maybe if you could do a refresh.
Yes, of course, I can take that question. So the white wine research was performed on German consumers in Germany. The gin research was conducted in Italy. And then finally, the tequila research was conducted in North American consumers.
Perfect. Thank you. And a part two to that, does this mean you should design the label before you choose your product?
I'll take that one. I think that I mean, I'm sure every situation is a little bit different, or it depends on the product that you're going to be going to market with. But I would say that that you need to define the product itself. You need to define the story that it's going to tell to the marketplace. What is the story you're going to come out with, and then design those labels and those features and that storytelling message around the product at the end of the day. So if it's a red wine, you probably don't want to say it's floral and fruity, to use some words that came from the study, or to bring that out in the messaging that you may want to use, that it's bold and full-bodied. So you most likely have to design the label, of course, after you have the product, but you need to define those USPs for the product that you want to bring into that story in advance.
And I see one other question coming in. Just a reminder, attendees, you can submit your questions via the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will be sure to get to those. But last question I'm seeing come in are these studies available via download? And the answer to that is yes, the UPM team will provide a link for us to the TLMI team to share via community, and then we will also send a link as a follow-up. So yes, that will come to you all. Okay. Well, we'll maybe give it a second or two if any other questions come in. Oh, and I think we just got one. There are so many aspects to consider when designing labels for wine and spirits. How do KERS and UPM support label converters in helping guide them to recommend the right solutions?
I can take that one, starting by conducting this research and sharing these results with the printers, of course, because now we can understand better how the consumer reacts in front of the designs and in front of these labels. So first of all, trying to understand how the consumer behaves in front of the packaging. And second of all, of course, sharing all of this information and all the information about our portfolios with our printers and users and designers, of course, trying to support them during the whole process. Alan, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, to add to that, Florencia, I think that at least from a Kurt's perspective, we like to consider ourselves consultants a lot for the industry. We work with so many different brands, so many different designers, so many different customers. Not saying we know it all by any means, because we do not. Many people are much smarter than us, especially as it relates to manufacturing their labels and things like that. But we do have enough experience as it relates to trends and things we see out in the industry, and or things that might look good and could be considered on a label that maybe someone who doesn't use it every day may not think of. Or we may understand technologies when working with the designer, as an example, technologies that are available to achieve certain effects and impacts that others may not be aware of if they're not familiar with those, those presses or that stamping equipment that's available out there for that's out there in the industry. So I think that getting close from a consultative perspective is really one of the ways that we try and support those converters.
I see another question coming in. Do you feel this study would hold true for personal care items and consumer products as well?
I'll start with that one. I think that the answer is yes. I think it would hold true, meaning that you need to do a study like this as far as the to find out what the engagement level is, because I can tell you in each one of these studies, we've learned something new. Um, have they always contributed to some of our core thoughts and messages? Yes. Have we always learned something new? Absolutely. Um, so the study, I think, would hold true, but I think you would find some things out about the consumers that you may or may not have already known. And I think it's important to dive down to that level, especially depending on what product you're trying to position, to really know what that consumer is thinking, what that level of engagement is, and then to step and repeat that. Because, like I said, you would see a completely different study maybe if we did it on red wine and in Italy, or red wine in Germany versus what the white wine was, and those expectations. So I would consider both.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for being here and sharing this information. This was fantastic. To our attendees, this was recorded as a reminder, and we will put the link to this in community by the end of the week so you all can watch out. As a final reminder, the post-event survey will be coming to you all right after this webcast, so please fill that out for a chance to win a $10 Starbucks gift card. And just appreciate our speakers, Alan and Florencia, for being here, and for UPM being a platinum sponsor here at TLMI. So thank you all so much for your time, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.